Tanya.
Asha, should we go ahead?
Yeah, please. It's 4.
Oh, okay.
Sudha.
Good evening, everyone. We've gathered today for listening to two of the greatest authors of India, Ms. Paro Anand, who is an author of books for children, young adults, including novels, short stories, and plays. She has won the Sahitya Akademi Bal Sahitya Puraskar in 2017 for her anthology Wild Child and Other Stories. Her latest novel, written in 2020, Being Gandhi. We also have Ranjit Lal with us, who's the author of around 45 books for children and adults. He has been awarded the ZIS Wildlife Lifetime Conservation Award for 2019 for writing with exceptional literary skills on conservation of wildlife, especially birds. As a journalist, he has written over 2,000 articles which have been published in both national and international press. Today, the topic that we are going to deliberate about is reading, a gateway to imagination and innovation. All of us as educators, in fact, keep cribbing that the reading habits of children is going down drastically. What do we do about it? So I leave the floor open to both our guests who will have some deliberation and maybe guide us as to what we should be doing and what is happening to this whole process of reading, learning, and writing. Over to you, ma'am, first.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to be on this. It's a very important subject to a very important group of people, because you're the people who actually make a difference. So thank you so much for that. I wanted to start by saying that as a child, I hated reading. And it's quite a miracle that I landed up being a writer and an avid reader. I hated reading, but in my home, we were a household of readers. And so every evening, we sat together as a family. There was some classical music playing, and we read for an hour. Every wall was lined with books. I hated that 1 hour because I thought it was a big waste of time. I wanted to live my life and not read about other people's experiences of their lives. Until I found the one book that just fit me. And that's it. It was an instant falling in love. My first love of books was Born Free by Joy Adams. And what connected me to that book was that here was a life that I possibly, most likely, would never be able to lead, but it was a life I could read. And that was the conversion point for me. I see my grandchildren now who are all of 1 year old. They are avid readers. And what has made the difference is that there are books. They have a bookshelf which they can easily access. It's about 2 feet, 2 feet or 3 feet high. And they pick up their books themselves. They can choose themselves. And they sit with their fathers in their laps and read every evening. And they are definitely, you can see them becoming readers. So I think that's the trick: accessibility, having a wide variety. One size doesn't fit all. And having like a routine, maybe, or a time, and routine sounds terrible, and allotted time when you sit together as a family and read. For me, these are the things that really converted me to being a reader.
I really think that for children, a little bit of danda is necessary to get them into the reading habit. You know, with me, what happened was I had an elder sister who was an avid reader. So summer holidays used to start and we used to go to the library and we used to come back. I used to come back to my younger sister with so many comics. May, June, we've got comics. She used to look at those comics and put them away. Now, this is my list of books that you must go through and read. And if you have any problems with them, you come to me, I'll explain to you. You find a word you don't understand, make a list, look up the dictionary, that is what it's there for. And of course, there's that resentment. You don't want to do that. You don't want to read 800 pages of Charles Dickens in your summer holidays. But karna pada wo. She was a born school teacher. So wahi se shuru hua practice. So she started, she made us do that. And then like Paru said that, there were some books which suddenly, there were books like the Three Musketeers, which I just love, Count of Monte Cristo. I just love those books. Robin Hood, Adventures of Robin Hood, some things like that. And then you found that you were reading on your own. You were picking up books by yourself. You didn't have to be told. And as I keep telling kids, every time you open a new book, it's like going into a new classroom because all the characters you meet in that book you have never met before. You don't know whether you are going to like them or they are going to like you or what's going to happen next. But then you get involved with what's happening to them and all the rest of it. So you have to get over that little bit of a resistance. But these days, I do feel that, with all this competition from, the internet and all the rest of it, schools should stipulate at least half an hour or 1 hour every day or every other day in which the class does nothing but read books in front of the teacher. It can, and the books can be either from the library or the teacher can check out that the books are fine and all the rest of it. But they will have to sit and read. Some of them will, as you said, will resent. Some of them will rebel, but some of them will get hurt. And that's what we're sort of aiming for. Because these days, there's just too much screen stuff. It's so easy. You're just spoon-fed everything. The image is there, the words are there. You don't have to use your imagination at all. So the kids, it's like, you don't have to do anything. There's no effort. With reading, there is an effort involved. And once you start enjoying that effort, and as Paru said, things fit in. Like even now I get lectures from my sister from America. She's been a school teacher all her life. Have you read this book? You must read this book. I read this very good article in the New York Times. I'll send it to you. Do read it. Let me know what you feel about it. So I still get that kind of, danda behind me, and I enjoy it. It's fun. So I do think these days a little bit of, it has to be made sort of mandatory that you will read a book in class for an hour or 45 minutes every day or every other day. I know syllabuses and all that are absolutely killers these days, but that's what I feel, that's one way of getting them into the habit. Not all will, some will.
You're absolutely right, sir. When you say that the school has to make it as a habit that these books should be read by the children, and I can totally relate when you say that your sister gave you the danda which I still get from my brother who's also in the States. And very rightly so, he will say, "Did you read this?" And sometimes I'm blank because till class 8th I did not pick up a book at all. And then after that, I started off with Gone with the Wind and Thornbirds. That's how I started my journey into reading. And nowadays, do you think that the danda can be used with the children of today?
Just make a reading period in the timetable, in the school timetable. Like we used to have an essay writing period once a week in school.
We all have, sir, we all have drop everything and read, that dear period in our school.
Drop everything and read.
But are they reading in front of the teachers?
Yeah.
Are they sort of?
Can I call Aditi ma'am now? Aditi ma'am, would you like to interact? Yeah.
No, ma'am, let's hear it from the two authors because I think.
But you had something to interact. We all can go. All of us can have one interactive session. So please come in.
So the first thing that Mr. Lal has said, I agree with completely. So we have a reading program right from class 1 for children.
Yeah.
And I must share a very funny anecdote when we introduced children to reading, and there were some who were reluctant readers. And one of them was asked by me that, have you read? He said, ma'am, I finished episode 1. I have to start episode 2, which showed me how much television he's on and not into chapters at all. So how are we as a nation? I mean, the CBSE is doing its bit. The government is doing its bit. We've started the 100-day reading mission. We have started Padhe Bharat. It's all in the NEP as well. And as part of that, actually, NPSC was very eager to listen to both of you eminent speakers, Paroji and you, Mr. Lal, to understand what else can we do, because these should not just remain missions on paper. That, you have to read, and there should be enough books, and, there should be age-appropriate books, and there should be books in the mother tongue. Because even today, when you go to a bookshop, you'll find some nice English books written by English authors, but there's very little with the backdrop the child is more comfortable with. So those are issues that still plague us. We're trying to do our bit as schools, but we do need support from authors like you to create that backdrop for our children to make it more real. Thank you so much, Sudha ma'am, for giving this opportunity.
The first thing I'm going to do is, in my next book, instead of having chapter 1 and chapter 2, give it episode 1 and episode 2.
That's very important. Actually, like Aditi ma'am said, nowadays children have their digital identity, I mean, reading is their last priority. So that's why how to really bring them back to reading a book. I mean, turning the pages of books.
I really don't believe this at all. I don't believe in the danda, because I know it didn't work for me. So if it didn't work for me, it was never going to work but I can't impose it on somebody else. So for me, the key is to make it fun, to make it exciting, and start from a very young age. Even when the baby has no idea of words, just to hold an infant in the arms and a book and just read that book and the repeated words over and over. Look, I know that if I hadn't found the fun, I wouldn't have been a reader, and therefore I wouldn't have been a writer. For me, that was too important. And the question of choice. I think taking children into a brick and mortar bookstore. I was working closely with one school. I ran a program called Literature in Action. So I would take the library council to a bookstore. We would have our meetings there, and they would choose books that would go into the library there. So there was that question, there was that ownership of choice. Me recommending that you should read Great Expectations or whatever it is, they won't want it. What worked, I'm just sharing some of the experiences that we had in our reading and other program, was to make those essential connections. So we had a shelf called My Shelf, where instead of, when you're returning a book, instead of just giving it to the librarian who would then put it back into its place, we had the My Choice books, and they would simply choose to put their book into the My Choice shelf. And behind, we had stuck a page on which you could put a smiley face or a angry face or a sad face or something. When a child, especially a non-reader, walks into a library during library period, they don't know what to choose. I'm sure all of you would agree that they run to Guinness Book of World Records, flip through it, and that's the end of the reading period. When a child, especially a non-reader, exactly, especially non-readers. So instead, we found that children would go to the My Choice shelf, look to the back of the book, and see if there were 5 smiley faces by different kids. That means it was highly
5 likes.
recommended.
5 likes.
Not expert, but sorry, Ranjit, were you saying something?
5 likes. Likes that you.
That's right.
Those smiley
Likes.
faces.
Just the likes. And kids connected with that and thought, okay, if 5, 6 other children like me and liked this book, maybe I like it. They started picking up those books, going into a library where you just see the spines of books. And in many schools, the spines all look the same because they've been bound. It's difficult to choose. The kind of, then we had some treasure hunts we made teams, and they would go into the library, and the library was not a quiet place. There was screaming, shouting, everything, and they were given certain clues, and it was like a treasure hunt, and they had to find that book. Once they found that book, then they would more likely read it. We had writers coming in as writer in residence, where we would pay a nominal kind of fee, give a cup of coffee and some biscuits, and the writer would get a place to read, and also have these endless number of guinea pigs. And I know that we did manage to convert quite a few non-readers into readers. We had a bookworm, where we put up these discs all around the school to make one long worm in the junior school, and kids were very interested to see that worm growing and growing. On each disc, the child put down what book they read, the author, and what they thought about it, anything that they thought about it, and would put up these. We had a Kaun Banega Karodpati, where Karodpati, I mean, it was not a crore, it was, I think, 1 million or something, where they would get people at home also to read. So your ayas, didis, we had a reading time where they were reading to the class 4 staff of the school. Then they would notch up those, and there was a box in which you kept filling, and there were mini milestones, so that the class who had read the most, the child who had read the most, were getting awards along the way. So it was, I think it's a question of making it exciting, because no matter what the danda, you're not going to make an actual reader. And just one last point, I know I've spoken a long time. We talk a lot about reading habit amongst children falling. How many adults are reading?
Exactly.
Teachers are reading. And if we're not reading, then how are we setting that example to say, look, it's a great thing to say.
Exactly.
Very true.
No, actually, the other thing that influenced me was my parents, because they read. And when you're 5 years old or 4 years old and you're seeing your parents sitting and reading, now at that age, you want to be grown up. And you think that, okay, this is something that grown-ups do, they read. So you better start reading or whatever it is. And yes, you had books of, what you could understand at 5 years or 6 years or whatever. So you also sat down. At that time, of course, there was no distraction of television and anything like that. But the basic point is, yes, how many parents sit down and read? My parents used to go to the club library and they used to come back. And very soon we were giving them names of books. See if you can find this book, please get it. And they used to bring about 6 or 8 books together. And we used to sort of pile onto them and say, did you get this? Did you find this book? And ask the librarian and all the rest of it. So a lot of that also, I think, depends on the home atmosphere. And we had a lot of time. We have this set of this hideous encyclopedia, or the Children's Encyclopedia by Arthur Mead. Hideously prejudiced against, the third world and Indians and dark people, and all those prejudices were there, full of pictures, full of a lot of general knowledge. And I used to just sit and flip through those things in the morning before breakfast, just going through the pictures and all that, and gradually imbibing stuff. And of course, they went on about their king and queen and all that crap. which now you understand is, you know, I mean, that book was, though that set has been banned, I believe, because it's so sort of racial and all the rest of it. But that, you know, it was also, again, as you said, access to books. And we didn't have to do any of these, you know, games or make a big, you know, this is the other thing I'm scared about, even with talking to children about environment. It's becoming a subject. And the moment something becomes a subject, there is going to be natural resistance to it. Now, how did I get interested in environment? It was just having access to huge gardens and roaming around and finding out things on your own. How not to fall out of a tree, which ant would bite you and which would not. You found out by experience. And then your interest grew. You wondered, now, why is it doing this? And why is it not doing that? And then you wanted to find out. So, and curiosity. They should not lose, you know, things today. I find this Google thing, it's very helpful, but it's such a nuisance. You just type the thing and all your things, everything is there, you know, presented to you on a platter. You don't have to bother, you don't have to do anything. So it makes life easy, but it makes it maybe too easy. But yes, I think this reading, if parents read and show by example, then your children will imitate you, because they want, I mean, little girls put on their mom's enormous slippers or shoes and go waddling around. So, you know, they will imitate you, and they will maybe sit down and say, hey, what's in it that, and parents can also play along, you know, if they're clever. They say, yeah, no, this, you only do this when you're grown up, you know, reading and all that. But you can try it and see if you like it, because we don't mind you. You're quite grown up already. So something like that could be tried, but we never did any of the, and library in school was a pigeonhole. And lunchtime, it used to be jammed, you know. We used to read all the, you know, those serials, that Biggles and William and all those things. And once you read one, then you want to read the others. And then there was competition between your friends. Have you read this one? This is the latest one that's come out. Have you read it? And so it was, you know, it was not formalized at all. It was completely informal. It was just a natural process. And I don't know how, I mean, one can bring that back these days, where everything is so structured, and a child's, you know, schedule for the day is sort of earmarked from the moment he or she gets up to the moment they collapse in bed in the evening, because you know, it's a different world. So it's difficult to sort of suggest anything that might really sort of click or work. But yes, imagination, that's the other thing. I remember one boy asked me, why do we need imagination? One little boy. So, I mean, because everything is available on Google, on internet. I said, you know, if J.K. Rowling didn't have an imagination, you wouldn't have Harry Potter. And all of you have read Harry Potter. Now just think about it and think about that for a moment. That if she didn't imagine all these characters, there would be no Harry Potters. And how much fun has Harry Potter given you? So it's, and that then his eyes opened a bit. I don't know whether it worked anymore, but so that's how it sort of goes. It is a difficult challenge, especially these days with so many distractions and such a tight, you know, syllabuses. And
Ranjit, don't you feel that there were always distractions? I mean, look, there were those who preferred to play cricket than to read.
Yeah, I did.
Who preferred to go for music class or drama class or whatever. Rather read, but and I think it's always been somewhat of a exclusive activity. I actually believe that children are really reading. Look, Ranjit, I think both of us have had this experience that some years ago when we went into a school, they didn't know who we were, and mostly they didn't really care. But now when you go in, you know, I mean, if you asked previously who were the Indian writers that they knew, they were blank. Maybe they would say Ruskin Bond, and they'd say R.K. You know, they'd say Malgudi Days, and then they would because they were studying those, but that was all they were. But now you go into schools and they know who you are. Some have read the book, some have brought a copy of the book to get it signed and all that. So I'm not too fussed about the fact that there is the, that there are the distractions. I think the way around it is to make it more innovative, as the title of this session is, to make reading, the process of reading, much more innovative. You have authors who are now much more willing to come out and interact with children, have their books quickly available, because your turnaround time should be really quick.
Yeah.
And immediately they want that book. You, as an author, you do a performance reading up to a point and then leave it and say, I'm not going to tell you anything more. I mean, we were talking about the Panchtantra. So I was actually acting in a play on the Panchtantra. And then in the school, I said, yeah, but the Panchtantra wasn't a children's book and was never conceived to be like that. In fact, there are some stories that could never be told in school. And they say, why? I said, because they're kind of inappropriate. They're kind of like, suddenly, like, the librarian came to me and she said, what did you tell them this suddenly? The Panchtantra. These are books that are languishing, collecting dust, and now suddenly they want to read the inappropriate bit of it.
Forbidden fruit. I think
So
we should all
you just have to be imaginative and innovative yourself.
We should all try and sell our books by saying that, you better not read this. Your parents might not like it, that you're reading this. Oh, your teachers will get angry. They'll all come to it.
Look at the lemony snicket one. Start off saying, oh, you seem to have picked up this book by accident. Drop it to me. You probably found it on the road. Someone else threw it. Throw it away. Don't read it. Don't read it. Oh gosh, you're still reading it. Oh, stop reading it now. Look, if you and kids are pages.
Well, the first thing one has to do is get that sort of book published also, because you have the whole gatekeeper of the editors.
Yeah.
There.
Harry Potter wouldn't have been published by the gatekeepers. Harry Potter would not have been.
Yeah.
She was rejected by
many. Yeah.
And Bloomsbury, it was the marketing people and not the editors. That it was a gold mine that they had chanced upon.
With me, the opposite has happened. I have been often told that, the editorial loved your book, but marketing has a problem. And my take is, look, if you give marketing a donkey, it's their job to sell that donkey. That's what they're there for. They're not there to see whether it's a nice donkey or a bad donkey or it's going to kick you or what. Or the very fact that it's a donkey and not a book. Their job is to sell it.
Yeah.
So what are they doing making these decisions?
Sir, if I may come in here, actually the stress on reading by the central government nowadays, that 100 days reading campaign and Padhe Bharat, that campaign, that was basically the outcome of Pratham report. All of you know that, that class 8 child is not able to read class 2 books. And the fun of reading and joy of reading, mostly we all are coming from private school background or CBSE school or little elite kind of school. So where we have this culture of reading, we are cultivating that culture of reading. And as you said, some of them have turned into authors also in our school. So they are writing also. But for most of the children, those who are in JNVs, in government school setup and all, for them, reading a storybook may be a luxury. So nowadays, we are stressing on storytelling session, how reading can lead to imagination, innovation. As you said, J.K. Rowling, I think she created another world where we try to imagine all sorts of character. So that's the trust and reading at the present time, how we can cultivate this culture of reading, which leads to actually imagination and innovation, creation, or empathy, resilience, character building, everything. I mean, you don't have to travel. Sitting at home also, you can travel throughout the world. So that was a thrust of reading at the present campaign. At this point of time, I would bring in Dr. Usha Ram, who wanted to interact with you. Usha ma'am.
Yeah, hi. It was lovely, because myself being a avid reader, and so both the speakers, lovely. They have come out with such, their own personal experience. One says that it should not be, compulsory, and it should come from within. And our second uh, person sir says that there should be some kind of compulsion also. There should be some. It's our own experiences. And in our own schools, as just now, Sudha, you have said, we have been trying out various methods, avid readers award, and, having the class library. And, in one of the schools, where I saw, which I really don't know somebody has said or not, they had made a corner. The class libraries were there in any case. There was one corner that any child who completes the work first, and they used to have some selected books. See, what is very important, children have to love it. We cannot force the children that you have to read this. So it is very important that our own teachers, see, my main thing is that our teachers, as sir just said, that the teachers have to be really motivated. They have to read. They have to tell the children, this is what we have read. And I remember in my school, I used to have, fortnightly, we used to have our staff club. We used to call it staff club, readers club. So if somebody, one by one, people had to share their own views. They have to share their own, the book that they have read, and, just discuss on that and nothing else, just a cup of tea and just discuss that. I still remember in 1975, we had started newspaper in education. I used to teach English only through that. All my, all the lessons that I would take up with them, on what is happening today and my grammar, we used to do it through newspaper in education. And that we started, and of course it has become a very, big event now. Many schools have, but I still remember that in 75 when I started, it was really taken up. People really liked it because I was teaching grammar only through that. And I used to keep 2-3 papers. I used to give Hindustan Times, Times of India, and 1 or 2 more papers, and say what journalists they are writing, how they are writing, to teach them that creativity and, wonderful. But what I really understand and what I really want to say, that it's important we should see that our teachers also read. If they read, they show interest. In any case, for children, there's so many, as sir just said, that, just go to Google and you can, find anything. But still, if they have to read, they have to become avid readers. The awards that we give, already, Sudha, you said you have so many children who have become authors. But then how to motivate everyone? It all depends on our teachers, on us. They should become avid readers. They should come out with lovely ideas. See, you cannot force the child, you read this. Let's see what age group, what they like to read. On the basis of that, certainly things will work out very well. And they're all doing very well. But this quality of reading and being an avid reader should remain, and we should all follow that. Thank you so much. It was lovely. I'm hearing and I'm enjoying, and I'm thinking of my own days, when I was doing it in the school. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam, for, sharing your views. It's lovely. Thank you. And I'm still here and I'm listening to you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Usha ma'am.
Sudha, for giving me an opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I was just thinking that we have a project called Every Human Being Has a Story to Share. So Human Library Project. So we have started that, Book My Story. So every Friday we have a session. So every child, every student can book a slot and tell his or her own story. So that's the new initiative we have taken, Book My Story session. So anybody, even you can share your own story also, just to give them an opportunity to express. So that's the new project we have started. Now I would invite Meenakshi Sahani, Principal Modern School, Basant Bihar, to either interact or put a question or say something on the topic.
Thank you, Sudha. Very fascinating discussion, and I'm actually prompted to share one of our experiences in school. Since we're talking about reading, one of the exercises that we carried out was particularly at the middle school and up level, because it prompts deeper levels of thinking. So we would pick up a story, a short story, and the protagonist we would pick up 3 children in the class, and one would be the protagonist, and there would be one who would act like the ego, and the third person like the alter ego. Now, they would actually dive deep into the story, and then they would sit and answer the questions thrown to them by the rest of the class. So the ego would explain it from the point of view of the ego, and the alter ego would make them look at another perspective, and I would do things differently. Now, that was a very, very powerful exercise in terms of, the children getting to understand another point, the value of another point of view. So there are various possibilities. So listening to Paro and Ranjit, I was just wondering, would it be an idea worth considering that a writers guild be formed for schools in particular, where the writers can pull in their ideas in terms of, or which could be translated into activities for schools, or action points for schools? Because I think you're the best people to know what is it that goes into the making of a writer, and how do we bring those things into the children's approach, attitudes, and day-to-day working. It's about observation powers, it's about vocabulary, it's about intonation, expression. There are so many things, but since I'm not a writer, I do not know so much about it. So maybe this is something that can be considered. The other, and these are just random thoughts, another one, that when I walk into a bookshop today, I find, or maybe my eye gets drawn, but as soon as you step in, 7 or 8 on 10 books that you first set your eyes upon are based on are self-help books. They are rising out of the business world, or all kinds of things. I mean, the power of negotiation, health, blah and blah. I mean, the works. But you hardly come across books which are to do with imagination. Now, when you're surrounded with that kind of material, where is the scope for imagination to creep in? So what are we missing here? How does this change? Do we make it compulsory for an imagination section to be created in bookshops? Because try walking into any bookshop today and you'll find that there is all the stuff around is a very high level, and it's coming from behavioral psychology, neuropsychology, that kind of. So any comments, please feel free.
To me, the answer to that is indie bookstores, the small bookstore, who, like in Delhi, there's Eureka, there's Full Circle, in there's in Gurgaon, Books and Beyond, is that what it's called? In Bangalore, there are some lovely bookstores, lovely libraries, and I think these are opened by people who actually love books. And I know I'm missing out many names right now, but find out the smaller bookstores in your vicinity. Try and take children there, maybe in small groups, maybe a library council. I saw a child being brought in by a mother. He was, I think, about 4-year-old. And he had got a Rakhi gift, which was a book coupon. And he came in very excited. I was there just as a customer. He came in very excited, ran to look at this book, that book, and all that, picked up one and took it to his mother, eyes sparkling. Can I take this book? And she looked at it and she said, do you think it's age appropriate? And he probably didn't know what age appropriate means. But just the look on her face, and he realized, no, it's not. So he took it back, and then he went looking for something else, brought it again, is it age appropriate? And this went on, and little by little, you saw that balloon of excitement deflating in him. By the time they left, she had chosen the book for him, and he kind of very sadly went up the stairs. He was never going to read that book, and he was not going to be a reader, because as a gatekeeper, we say, I know better what's good for you, right? We allow our kids to have pizza occasionally, besides having karela and dal every day. Why don't we allow them? Why are we so fussed about them having the book of their choice? nahi samajh mein aayi to they won't read it, they'll put it aside, they'll come back to it. But let that sense of ownership come. And that sense of ownership, I just wanted to share one incident where we had the late, so sad to say late, but the late Subhadra Sen-Gupta, who we lost to COVID recently. I had edited one of her books and had published it. And then I just thought that this was a really interesting book and she should do a sequel. And she said, I don't have enough material. I said, come in as a writer in residence. So she came in, she used to come in 4 or 5 times a week and sit in the library, and children were free to go up to her and talk to her, discuss it. And she told them that, look, you have to read the first part of the book. I mean, the first episode, let's say, and then you can come and help me on the second one. And there was a boy who in class 8 or 9, Karthik, he said that I've never read a book in my life. So she said, then sorry, you can't help me. So he read the book, the first one. And he was so enthused that he told her that I want to be a character in your next book. Only thing, don't make me commit suicide. I don't want to commit suicide, but anything else you can do. And so she made him a character in the book, and she had them, a whole bunch of them, researching what were the weapons that would be used, what kind of clothes would they wear. One of them was in jail and he had to get out. So what kind of awzar would he have to get out of jail? The amount of reading that came out of that experience. And then we had the book launch at the school with this particular boy who proudly had said, never read a book. I met him not long ago and he said, I've continued reading. So again, back to the point that let's make it exciting. Let's make it fun.
Well, I don't think you need to worry too much about that to gatekeeper mom and her little boy. Because if that little boy had any sense, he would have seen the name of the book. He knows what book that he wanted to read. It was banned. Even the moment he has enough money, pocket money, he saved up, he will sneak back to that shop and buy that. He may not like it, but he will buy it because Mama has said, no way, there must be something in this book that she doesn't want me to see. I have just got to see it. Don't worry. I would have done that. I would have paid a mental note. This is the book. Okay. We will come back. Don't worry. When nobody else is around. And we can go and read it quietly in one corner maybe. But we will read it. Because kids are like that. The moment you say, they they'll do. That's one way of getting them to do things that you say, you just play opposites. And sometimes you can get away with it. But maybe they can catch on to that also. But this is a good idea. This is the other thing I thought, which is a little maybe labor intensive, was if maybe you want to do chapter by chapter, you have a different child taking up the role of different characters, and it's them read that, like a play. You read out your dialogue or whatever, and there will be a narrator who then fills in the gaps, but then a lot of work has got to go into that, because not all the class will be able to read at the same time because there are just a few characters. But it might get the children a little more involved in the reading process, and in other children then may get curious that, okay, let's read it, let's see, and next time I want to be this character, please. And so on. Just like almost like what you said about that Karthik, similar involvement in the story itself. And yes, there's got to be a lot, as somebody earlier had pointed out, that there's nothing about with an Indian background. Now, thank God, I mean, that situation has improved, because we grew up with Enid writing, and people, I think, could understand why she was going on and on about sunny day, sunny day, sunny day. Here you have almost, I mean, these days it's not very sunny, I know. Today, these days, it's horrible. But now you understand that mostly, I mean, we have always had sunshine, so we never bothered about it. So what is she going on and on and on about all that? It didn't make sense. What the hell has cons? Never had a con.
Yeah.
Go to your mom, make us
Or tongue sandwiches is what I used to do.
I don't, that's the thing about it. Yeah, never understood. But she still had you gripped because her storytelling skill, whatever it was, prejudice or whatever it was, and inappropriate and this, that, but you still read the story.
Yeah.
And we all grew up on those sort of, and then of course when Indian authors started coming up, I mean that was really good, because then the kids can identify that, yes, I know exactly what they're talking about. But the other thing is, it's very, I had a session with some other school, I don't remember where it was, Hyderabad or somewhere like that. I don't know whether it's COVID that has done this, this 2 years of incarceration at home or incarceration at home. Because, those kids, they were like zombies. I have never met a bunch of kids. It was so sad. And I read out a short story and all that. And basically the premise of that story was friendship. Or you will be loyal to your friend come what may. And what scared me was they didn't understand the concept of loyalty of that kind. That yes, in a class, if somebody's done badmashi and is called up and the teacher says, now who did it? We never used to point fingers. A whole class used to get punished. But you are not going to point out the criminal. You had that loyalty. These kids, they didn't understand that concept. I was appalled. I don't know whether it's this isolation that is, breeding this kind of a thing, that, they just don't have that. So forget about reading. It's, these basic things. It's, I was really sort of taken aback. And so I think, the reading and all these things have to be sort of pushed. And I don't know what this pandemic has done to these poor kids, because keeping them at home and, all the time, they must be going up the wall.
You're absolutely right, sir, because pandemic has affected, I think, the kids in a big way. We've got Aditi ma'am who would like to ask a question. Aditi ma'am, over to you.
So, I agree with you, Mr. Lal, that the pandemic has played havoc with the children's emotional health, definitely. But it has also been an occasion for many of them to try their hand at writing. A lot of children have got published. A lot of them have written short stories, anthologies. So just the wild idea coming from Sudha ma'am's idea of having that Friday writing a story. Yes. Is there some way that people like you can reach out to little children with just elements of storytelling, story writing? What are the do's and don'ts? It can be done online, just a little tutorial kind of a thing which can go out to them. The other good thing is that, now we've discovered technology at our age also. So we are so excited of shoving things into what we call our webzine. There is nothing to say that, your book cannot be 50 pages or 80 pages. The webzine has unlimited space. Short stories coming in, short poems coming in, doodles to accompany that kind of writing coming in. Do you think that's a possibility? Would you have the time, inclination, and bandwidth to do that with the children? Thank you so much, Parujit. It's so encouraging, because you're going to get inundated with messages.
Well, I just wanted to share this book. It's called Unmasked, and it's stories from the pandemic. This is actually my latest book. Being Gandhi was a little while back. There are some books after that. So Unmasked is stories from the pandemic. And as you see over here are the kids living in high-rise buildings. And these are people in the slums, in the Dharavi slums. And this is kind of the common enemy, or you could say, this is the only one who was free, who were the birds, but whichever way you interpret it. And these are 19 stories, because they're COVID's 19 stories. But what I have done is the first chapter, the first story is a poem by a 12-year-old girl. It was a very moving poem. And the 19th story, I have left blank. So write your COVID story. Since it's such a shared experience, so you write your COVID story in this, so that each copy of this book becomes unique. So I'm very happy to open a competition. And then if you like, you can send me the top 10 or whatever from it, and I will send signed copies of this book or another book, maybe another book. So this is a book for teenagers.
Excellent, excellent, ma'am.
Well, I don't know how you're going to interpret this, but that bird on the cover of your books, that's a bald eagle.
Yeah.
That's a bald eagle, which is the national bird of the United States.
United States,
I don't know whether there's any, behind the scenes psychology going on. This is the land of the free.
Ask Priya Kurias
This is the land of the free. Where they're doing exactly what we are doing, actually. They're behaving the same way. But, there could be some subliminal message over there.
Or that it was the birds were the only ones, the wildlife was the only one which was free.
Yeah.
Were in the cages and they were in
well, bats were also free, but unfortunately, they have been blamed for COVID-19. You can actually be interesting to do a story. You could be interesting to do a story.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for these. Thank you, sir, for these, anecdotes on the COVID and everything. And it does kind of make us also feel that what are we supposed to do next? We have a very senior member in our NPSC team today, Mr. S.L. Jain. He would like to ask something. Mr. Jain?
Well, I have been enjoying the show and the anecdotes and everything. And it has been very stimulating and interesting. I just wanted to share that during this COVID period last year, we did an exercise with our students. Some students, 16 of them from classes 5 to 8. And we did a workshop under the supervision of one of our old students, Miss Tanvi Gupta. And the name of this book is Vibdur. So the hues of the rainbow. And then what these children did was that they were made to read certain books, and then they wrote stories themselves, and this book came out. Everyone wrote a story of 2, 3, 4 pages, and very, very stimulating and very interesting. So this experiment, and now we are going to extend it to more children when once the schools reopen and more children are available, then this we are going to make a regular feature, and then they can be published. So having a published work before them, it really activates and motivates them to read and then write, and their creativity things they improve. So that is what I wanted to share. But it has been a wonderful webinar, and the lead speakers have shared very, very interesting aspects of reading, writing, and their experiences all through. Thank you so much.
Anya, if I could just add one small point, and I'll be quick.
Yes, ma'am.
That sometimes, especially when we get to the teen years, you see a big drop off of reading. One, of course, because the burdens on those years are a lot, but also because the gatekeepers haven't yet learned to take a step back. I feel very nervous about what children are reading. I think that we need to make ourselves braver. I've worked with over 3 lakh children through my program Literature in Action. And I find that I always ask children, what kind of books do you want me to write? And the kind of subjects, the kinds of themes that they say, especially after you've left the venue and they're following you and they want a quiet word with you, are the kind of themes that they really want, whether it's about love, whether it's about inter-religion relationships. One girl in a small school in Haryana, she wanted, she said that Veere the wedding aapne dekhi hai? I said, हाँ. She said, आप बुरा तो नहीं मानोगे अगर मैं पूछूं? I said, नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं बुरा मानूंगी. She said, आपको पता है कि Veere the wedding में कौन से सीन के बारे में मैं पूछ रही हूँ? I said, हाँ, मैं समझ गई कौन सा सीन. she said, "आप उसके बारे में क्यों नहीं लिख सकते हो?" And it's basically a scene on masturbation, self-gratification. And this is what she wanted a book on. There was obviously questions of
Curiosity, yeah.
her mind. But I mean, could I write it? Yeah, maybe I could. Would it be published? Unlikely. Would it get into a school or a home where there was a child? Never. But this is what children do need: stories that answer questions and also raise questions for them. This book of mine,
You're very right.
the other deals with very difficult circumstances, and children who have been otherized, whether they are disadvantaged economically or are special need or have suffered sexual abuse or are discovering their own, sexuality. One of them is about a trans boy. And I know that schools are in a difficult situation as far as parents. The WhatsApp parents groups are a fearsome beast. But yeah, I think we need to grow up also.
No, you're very right, because in one of my last stories, it was there was this little affair going on between the 14-year-old girl and a 16-year-old boy, amongst other things happening. And the remarks that came back was, you don't need this love story. It doesn't, and children of that age will not understand or anything like that. And the thing was that, I had gone to a festival in Bangalore, Children's Lit Festival. And there was this girl, she must have been about 12, and there's this little boy about 10 or 11. They were not related. And this girl was looking at this boy with complete adoration. He'd written something and she was looking at it. And I took a series of pictures. I sneaked it, 3 pictures. And you could make out from the face that if something is not happening right now, it's going to happen very soon. That boy was grinning from ear to ear. He was happy. He was just happy. And the girl was, she had this adoration enough. I put those pictures up on my wall downstairs. So I sent the editor these pictures. I said, "This now you decide." And they say, "Yeah, okay." So they have to also be educated that, you got to get moving. And, if you can explain these things in the way they ought to be explained, then there's nothing like it, because the kid is getting educated you might, otherwise on the internet, you'll find all sorts of stuff, And and what I do is, normally when I'm writing stuff like this, I go to a level beyond which I know that it's going to be gatekeep. If the gatekeepers are going to come down on it. So you take just one small step back, which is actually the position you really wanted to be. And sometimes you can, without actually writing it, you can just imply it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't have to write it down in words, in black and white words. But the kid can get the gist that, behind the scenes, this is what's between the lines, this is what they're talking about. And nobody can accuse you of anything. I mean, the gatekeeper said, if you're going to interpret it like that, that's your problem. I don't know whether the child, I don't think the child will. Maybe will, maybe won't, but it's not there in black and white. So, I mean, what's the problem? You have to do these sneaky things to get away with stuff, because otherwise it's difficult.
Thank you so much. Just listening to you, with both of you actually, and we started off with Paro ma'am telling us that the danda will not work, you telling us that yes, the danda will work a little bit, and then how you're talking about different subjects that would interest the children. I think it is a great lesson for us. And this whole conversation this whole interaction has been very, very stimulating, I think, for all of us. I would like to request Asha ma'am to deliver the vote of thanks. Asha ma'am, please.
Thank you, Tanya.
Over to
Can
you.
I ask a question before that?
Yes, Asha ma'am, I think sir wants to ask a question. Mr. Bish?
Yeah, actually,
Sure.
good evening, everyone. I was listening to the complete interaction. First of all, a big thank you to NPSC and Sudha ma'am for organizing such wonderful sessions. Ms. Pardo and Mr. Ranjit, we were discussing towards the last leg of the session that, there are unconventional topics which are there, which are to be discussed. Like you talk about the masturbation. So these are the things which need to be talked about nowadays. Because I feel the parents are apprehensive talking about it. Teachers are also not talking. So who will give the correct information to the children? So book reading could be a very good way of teaching the children what is expected, what is not expected, what pleasure they're getting, and to what extent, if we can actually talk about these reproductive health education books also, reproductive health education, I'll say, because they need to connect it with the reproductive health, not the bad habits only. So I think this was a wonderful discussion towards the end, but it did not come to any conclusion. How to go about, how to write such books so that it can educate the children, make them understand how and what kind of impact these things are going to have on their life. I just wanted both of them to please dare to write beyond the traditional things, come to the unconventional writing options. I think you people are the actual mirror of the, the society where the children need to understand this. Anyways, I'll not say much about it, but yes, I hope I've made my point very clear. I think we need this kind of a literature also where our children could understand what are do's and what are don'ts of such activities as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bish. Thank you so much. Thank you. Asha ma'am?
Thank you, Tanya. Well, very, very stimulating and engaging session. And the world becomes a global village when cemented together with a culture of reading diverse books. And it could enable one to accept and exchange ideas, opinions, and posts without narrow-minded confines or hindrances, such as the magic of reading, pure and simple. I'm extremely grateful to our two panelists, reputed authors, Mr. Ranjit Lal and Mrs. Paro Anand, for speaking with so much of passion and conviction on how a child's formative years and his tryst with reading forms a solid building block for all his later years. Books are a window to the whole new world of reflections and insights, and they hold the key to innovation, traversing borders, nationalities, and race. NPSC also strongly believes in taking imagination, creativity, and innovation to an entirely new level, and it is so important to begin by imagining things outside, inside one's mind when they are not yet visible on the outside. Well, on behalf of all of us, the core team of NPSC, and on behalf of the chairperson NPSC, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the honorary members of NPSC present today, Usha ma'am and Mr. Jain, and to everyone for joining in to attend this webinar. We look forward to more such rewarding exchanges of ideas and perspectives. Till we meet again, it's goodbye from our side. Stay safe, stay healthy. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Namaskar. Thank you so much for coming in. And we truly feel privileged to have both of you, such celebrated authors amongst us. I hope your deliberation would definitely inspire our teachers to come forward and read, at least. We expect that. And that will percolate down to students. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. It was very enriching.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Looking forward to the book with episodes, sir.
Yes. And those 19 stories, definitely we will read.
Yes, and I will send from my